Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, I want to talk to you guys about a few different land features that you guys should be looking for and focusing on for your stand locations in order to increase your chances of having shot opportunities at the local bucks. Most of us only have so much time to be in the woods, to go out hunting. Life is very busy. So we want to give ourselves the best possible chance at success by choosing the best possible stand location. And for those of you guys that are currently subscribed to our channel, I do want to take the time to say thank you. It really does mean a lot that you guys are taking time out of your busy schedule to watch our videos. For those of you guys that are not subscribed, I do encourage you guys to consider it. We do a lot of videos throughout the hunting season on the tips and strategies that we're focusing on during the season. But during the off season, we also put together videos on the different habitat improvements that we're working on our properties. Anything from creating bedding areas to putting in food plots to creating deer trails, putting in mock scrapes, water holes. You name it, if it's deer related or habitat related, there's a good chance that we have a video on it on the channel. But getting back to today's video on a few land features that we can focus on for our stand locations to help increase our chances at the local deer herd. Now hopefully this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. Whenever we're choosing a location to hunt, we want to be intentional about that decision, meaning there needs to be a reason that we're picking that location over another. And hopefully that decision is that there's a higher probability of deer movement, meaning that the deer movement in that area is not random. There's a reason for the deer to be moving through that area. And before we cover the land features that I like to focus on for my stand locations, first, let's start with one that I don't like to focus on, one that you should avoid. And I'm actually standing in that location right now. If you can see behind me, I'm standing in an open woodlot. This would be a very difficult location to hunt because outside of a few oak trees, there is no reason for the deer to be in this location. Now, deer do travel through this area, but the movement is always random. There's no consistency to it. So if I were to ever hunt in this open woodlot behind me, it would be very difficult for me to get close to deer and to have shot opportunities. Again, this is open hardwood, so as the deer travel through, they could be on the east side of the woodlot or they could travel through the west side of the woodlot. So because I don't have defined movement, there's not a lot of consistency, hunting this open woodlot would be a very low probability stand location. And that's obviously not what we want when we're picking a stand location. We don't want to have a lot of random movement through the area. We want to focus on areas that have more predictable deer movement, more consistency with how the deer travel through the area. So that's what I want to kind of jump into next are a few land features that you guys can focus on to find that more predictable deer movement. And these different land features are going to be in no particular order. All of these different locations we're going to talk about are going to offer great hunting opportunities. And the first land feature that I want to talk about in this video is connecting cover. And some guys will call these funnels, some guys will call these bottlenecks. Really what we're dealing with here is a thinner strip of cover that connects two larger sections of cover. So for example, let's say you have a large section of cover to the west and you have a large section of cover to the east. And these two larger sections of cover are connected by a thinner strip of cover. This thinner strip of cover could be a ditch, it could be a hedgerow that separates two farm fields. It could also be a thinner section of a swamp that connects two larger swamp systems. A few of the areas that I hunt here in Michigan in farm country, we see this a lot. There's a lot of open fields, and deer, as they're traveling from one section of cover to the other, they try their best to not expose themselves in that open field. That's very dangerous for these deer, especially here in Michigan, to walk across an open field. And so they will follow that cover as it pinches down, and they'll use that thinner strip of cover to try to sneak from one side to the other. Again, this is a lot safer than cutting through that open field. And that's an example of connecting cover or a funnel in farm country. But what if you're in a big wood setting and you don't have open fields to constrict or consolidate that deer movement? There are still going to be funnels that deer will use to travel through the area. And a lot of times, this is just a thicker section of that cover. For example, if you have a lot of wide open hardwoods, but you have a thinner swamp system that cuts through that wide open hardwoods, that will likely be the preferred travel route for deer as they move from point A to point B. Just like the open field example in farm country, deer, especially older bucks, they do not want to expose themselves in an open woodlot. They would much rather stay within cover. So if you can identify a thicker section of that cover that works through the neighborhood or your property, that is likely one of the preferred routes that the deer are taking as they move through the area. This can just be a thicker section of the woods, maybe it's a swamp system, maybe it's a thicker creek bottom. If you can find a thicker section of cover that works through a more open woodlot, that's a great spot to focus on for your stand location, because that's likely the preferred route that the deer are going to use as they travel from point A to point B. The next land feature that I want to touch on is very closely related to those funnels or that connecting cover in farm country, and that's an inside corner. An inside corner is really just the back corner of an open field. So if you were to make an L with your hand, it's probably backwards for the camera, but you have an open field right here, and you have got a woodlot right here and a woodlot right here. This corner right here, this is the inside corner. And the reason that this is a great location to key on for your stand location is because, again, deer don't want to expose themselves in that open field. Now, they will travel across that field from time to time, but for the most part, deer want to remain in cover. For example, if you have deer on, let's say, the southern section of cover that want to get to the northern section of cover, they're likely not going to travel across that open field. Instead, what they're likely going to do is travel along the edge of the southern woodlot, staying within cover, cut that corner, and then start working north. A lot of times with this land feature, the inside corner, you can have numerous trails coming together right at that inside corner, because deer are going to be traveling from different sections of that cover, and they're all going to meet at that inside corner. So again, an inside corner or that back corner of an open field is one of my favorite areas to target when trying to find locations with more consistent or more predictable deer movement. The next land feature that I like to focus on when trying to find more predictable deer movement are edges or changes in habitat type. Deer, bucks, they really gravitate towards edge, and they love to travel along edge. And again, the best way to explain what an edge is, it's where one habitat type transitions into another. And there are a lot of different examples of edges. You could have an open hardwoods like I've got behind me that transitions into a swamp system. You could have an open field that transitions into warm season grasses. You could have a stand of conifers next to a recent clear cut. Almost everywhere where you have edge, one habitat type transitioning into another, you are likely going to find a deer trail that runs along with that edge. Another type of edge is elevation change. Topography really defines deer movement. The properties that I hunt here in Michigan are fairly flat. We don't have a whole lot of elevation change, but even a small change in elevation, 5 feet, can really define deer movement. And a lot of times this coincides with that habitat change. You might have a woodlot that slopes down or transitions into a swamp system or maybe a cattail marsh. Right along the bottom side of that small hill, right along that edge is a great area to focus on, because there's a good chance that the local deer herd and the bucks are working that edge. Sticking with elevation, another land feature that you guys should be looking for when trying to find predictable deer movement for your stand location are benches. And a bench is really just a flatter section in what's an otherwise steep hillside. So you have a really steep hillside that flattens out onto the bench, and then after the bench it drops back down. This flat section of the hillside or the bench is one of the more preferred ways deer travel in areas with a lot of elevation change. And there's a few reasons deer prefer to travel along benches. One, it's a lot easier to travel along the bench as opposed to that steep hillside. And it's not that deer can't travel along the steep hillside, it's just more difficult. And if unpressured, a lot of times deer, they like to take that path of least resistance. They like to take the easier route. And in hill country, areas with a lot of elevation change, the benches are a lot easier for these deer to travel from point A to point B. Another reason deer like to travel along benches is because it's safer. They can't be seen by anything on the other side of the hill, and they can see a lot of what's going on below them as they travel along the bench. Also, if you're in an area with a lot of elevation change, deer can use thermals to their advantage as well. So if you're able to identify a bench system, and the longer the bench system, the better, this is an area that I would focus on for my stand location to capitalize on more predictable deer movement. And the last land feature that I want to talk about in this video that you guys should be focusing on for your stand locations is one of my favorites, and that's a pinch point. And technically, a lot of these different land features that we've talked about so far are pinch points. You know, they're consolidating deer movement down, they're pinching movement down. But for this example, the pinch points that I want to talk about have to deal more with obstructions or obstacles that deer are trying to avoid that consolidates their movement. We used an open field in a few different examples earlier as an area that deer try to avoid. You know, they're gonna a lot of times avoid that open field and work around it. But there are other areas on your property that deer will also try to avoid and work around. On the properties that I hunt, a lot of times this has to do with standing water. Deer can walk through that standing water if they want to, but just like with the open field, they would prefer not to. They would much rather, if unpressured, walk along the edge of it, walk around that lake, walk around that pond. Another obstacle or obstruction that consolidates or pinches deer movement down are down trees. For example, if you have a bedding cut on your property, or maybe you have a blockade cut behind your stand location, you just knocked a bunch of trees down. You know, that's going to direct deer movement. That's going to pinch deer movement down. And with the bedding cut example, it's not that the bucks can't get through that area. It's just that they would prefer to walk around it. It's much easier to walk around. So if you have a bedding cut on your property, hunt that in a similar way that you would hunt the pond. Set up along the downwind edge of it, because a lot of times that's where bucks will be cruising as they're moving through the area. And those are some of my favorite land features that I like to be focusing on when trying to find more predictable deer movement for my stand locations. And the more of these that you can combine together, the better. And I'll just close this video out with giving you guys an example from my property here. We're in more of a heavy cover area here, so we can't use a lot of those open field examples, but we still have some great funnels and great pinch points on the property. A lot of the area surrounding my property and around my house is open hardwoods. However, we do have a thicker swamp system that runs north to south. So if you're a deer and if you're one of the older bucks in the neighborhood and you're trying to get from one side of my property to the other, you're not going to want to walk through the open hardwoods. You're not going to want to walk next to my house. Instead of traveling through the open hardwoods, what they prefer to do is travel through that thicker corridor, that thicker swamp system that travels north to south through my property. Not only do these bucks want to stay within that thick cover, but my pond also creates a pinch point. They want to go around the pond. So we can combine that predictable movement through that thick travel corridor along with the predictable movement as deer skirt around my pond to have a very high odds stand location. So what my son and I did is we created a trail that actually cuts along the downwind side of this thicker swamp system. It works just along the downwind edge, runs north to south, and then we shot it out into one of our food plots. We hung a double ladder stand right on the edge of our pond, and then we installed a water hole and a mock scrape just upwind of the stand location right on that new trail. So now as bucks are cruising through the neighborhood and they're using this thicker swamp system to get from point A to point B, so now on a northwest or a west wind, as bucks are cruising along this new trail, we can set up downwind, blow our scent back over the pond, back towards our house, and have a great chance at one of the local bucks. We have a few pretty good stand locations on this property, but that one is one of my favorites. But that's going to do it for today's video, guys, on a few land features that you guys should be looking for to try to find more predictable deer movement. Thank you guys again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.